The Borg cube is presented as a weapon, a vast geometric structure that carves through space, harvesting civilizations and folding them into a single ruthless intelligence. The official framing treats assimilation as a conversion event. You are taken, you are integrated, you become part of something larger. The individual ends, and the drone begins. But that framing conceals a more disturbing reality. Assimilation does not erase the self, it imprisons it. Life inside a Borg cube is not the absence of consciousness. It is the weaponization of consciousness against itself, sustained without rest, without privacy, without the possibility of death as release. The collective does not grant oblivion, it enforces awareness. To understand what existence inside a cube actually means, the starting point is not technology, it is the architecture of control the Borg impose on every mind they absorb. The collective is not a hive mind in the biological sense. It is an imposed network that forces billions of active minds into alignment while leaving enough individual cognition intact to perform specialized tasks. Drones retain memory, skill, and situational awareness. They do not retain autonomy. The distinction is critical. A drone is not unconscious. A drone is awake, processing and present, but every decision, every movement, every thought is routed through the collective's central architecture. The self is not deleted. It is overridden in real time, continuously, for as long as the drone exists. Canon makes this visible in ways that are easy to overlook. When Captain Picard is assimilated and transformed into Locutus, he does not become a blank slate. He retains his strategic knowledge, his understanding of Starfleet doctrine, and his capacity for complex reasoning. The Borg use him precisely because those faculties remain intact. But Picard himself, the entity capable of choice, is buried under a layer of enforced instruction he cannot resist. He speaks, he acts, he knows what he is doing, but he cannot stop. That is the design. The Borg do not want empty shells. They want functional minds held in a state of total compliance. 7 of 9 provides the clearest evidence of what this imprisonment looks like from the inside. After her separation from the collective, she describes the experience not as a void, but as a presence. She remembers being part of the collective. She remembers the voices. She remembers having no ability to act on her own desires, even though those desires still existed in some submerged form. The collective did not remove her identity. It submerged it beneath a layer of external command so dense that resistance was structurally impossible. When she is freed, the trauma is not from having been erased, it is from having been aware the entire time. The cube itself is built to sustain this condition at scale. Every surface, every corridor, every chamber is optimized for function and nothing else. There are no private spaces. There are no rest areas. Drones regenerate in alcoves, standing upright, connected to the cube's power network. But regeneration is not sleep. It is a maintenance cycle. The mind remains partially active, processing directives, updating shared knowledge, and preparing for the next task. There is no moment where a drone is truly offline. Even in regeneration, the collective is present. The absence of rest is not an oversight. It is a feature. The Borg do not recognize downtime as a legitimate need, because downtime implies individual discretion. A drone does not choose when to stop working. A drone does not experience fatigue as a signal to withdraw. The body is maintained at peak efficiency through nanoprobes, and the mind is held in a state of enforced readiness. If a drone's body begins to fail, it is repaired or replaced. If a drone's mind begins to degrade, new neural pathways are constructed, or the drone is reassigned to a less cognitively demanding role. The system does not tolerate waste, but it also does not tolerate rest. The collective operates on the principle that consciousness is a resource to be exploited continuously. The interior of a Borg cube reflects this logic in its layout. There are no crew quarters. There are no mess halls. There are no recreational spaces. Every area is a workspace. Drones move through the cube along predetermined paths, performing maintenance, assembling technology, processing biological material, or preparing for the next assimilation. The cube is a factory where the workers are also the product, and the assembly line never stops. When Starfleet officers board a cube, they report an overwhelming sense of claustrophobia, not from the physical dimensions of the corridors, but from the total lack of anything that acknowledges individual existence. The cube is not designed to be lived in. It is designed to be worked in forever. The distribution of labor inside the cube follows a hierarchy that is invisible to outsiders but absolute in practice. Not all drones perform the same tasks. The collective assigns roles based on the skills and biology each individual possessed before assimilation. A drone who was a surgeon continues to perform surgical tasks. A drone who was an engineer continues to perform engineering tasks, but these roles are not chosen. They are assigned, and they are permanent unless the collective determines a reassignment is necessary. A drone has no say in what it does. It has no ability to request a transfer, to refuse an order, or to express dissatisfaction. The collective optimizes for efficiency, and efficiency demands that each unit perform the function it is best suited for without deviation. This creates a disturbing form of functional continuity. A drone retains its expertise, its training, its accumulated knowledge, but all of that is now property of the collective. The individual who spent years mastering a skill now performs that skill on command, unable to refuse, unable to take pride in the work, unable to stop. The result is a kind of existential theft. The drone is not doing its job. The collective is doing its job using the drone's hands, and the drone is aware of this distinction but powerless to resist it. The psychological architecture of assimilation is built on suppression, not deletion. The Borg do not erase personality. They bury it. 7 of 9 describes the collective as a constant noise, a flood of voices and instructions that drown out individual thought. The self is still there, but it cannot surface. It cannot act. It can only observe. This is not unconsciousness. It is enforced spectatorship. The drone experiences its own actions as if watching someone else pilot its body. The sense of agency is stripped away, but the sense of presence remains. Canon shows this dynamic most clearly in the moments when drones are briefly severed from the collective. In Voyager's encounter with the damaged Borg sphere, a small group of drones loses connection to the hive mind. The result is not relief. It is panic. The drones do not immediately celebrate their freedom. They are disoriented, confused, and desperate to reconnect. The collective has conditioned them to experience separation as a form of injury. For some, the sudden return of individual thought is overwhelming. For others, the absence of the collective's guiding presence feels like a void. These drones have spent years, sometimes decades, without making a single independent decision. The capacity for autonomy has atrophied, not because it was removed, but because it was never allowed to function. This is the collective's most insidious mechanism. It does not need to destroy the self. It simply makes the self irrelevant. Over time, the buried identity stops struggling. It stops trying to assert itself. It learns that resistance is not just futile, but exhausting. The drone continues to exist, but it exists in a state of total passivity. The collective has turned consciousness into a tool that cannot refuse to be used. The temporal experience inside a cube is equally distorted. A drone does not experience time the way an individual does. There are no days. There are no shifts. There are no milestones or personal events to mark the passage of time. The collective assigns tasks, and the drone completes them. When one task is finished, the next begins immediately. There is no pause. There is no anticipation of an end to the workday. The drone does not think about the future because the future is identical to the present. The only change is the nature of the task itself. This creates a kind of temporal flatness. Without variation, without rest, without the ability to choose how to spend a moment, time stops functioning as a meaningful dimension of experience. A drone might be assimilated for 10 years or 50 years, but from the inside, the distinction is meaningless. There is no narrative, there is no progression. There is only the present moment, repeating endlessly, with the self trapped in the background, unable to intervene. The cube's environment reinforces this erasure of time. The interior lighting is constant. There are no windows. There is no external reference to day or night cycles. The temperature is regulated. The air is processed. Everything is uniform. The collective removes every environmental cue that might allow a drone to track the passage of time independently. The result is a sensory environment that feels timeless, not in the sense of eternity, but in the sense of stagnation. Nothing changes, nothing evolves. The cube is a perpetual present tense. The absence of privacy inside a cube extends beyond the physical. The collective has access to every thought, every memory, every sensory input a drone experiences. There is no internal space that remains private. A drone cannot think without the collective knowing. A drone cannot feel without the collective registering that emotion. The boundary between self and system is dissolved entirely. The mind is not the drone's own. It is a node in a network, and the network monitors every signal. This level of intrusion has profound consequences for identity. Privacy is not just a luxury. It is a structural requirement for selfhood. The ability to have thoughts that are not immediately known by others, the ability to experience emotions without external judgment, the ability to maintain an internal life separate from one's public actions. These are the conditions that allow an individual to exist as an individual. The Borg remove all of these conditions. The drone has no secrets. The drone has no inner world. Everything is exposed, everything is shared, and everything is subject to the collective's control. The biological modifications the Borg impose on drones are designed to sustain this system indefinitely. Nanoprobes repair tissue damage, regulate metabolic functions, and enhance physical durability. A drone does not age in the conventional sense. The body is maintained at a stable baseline, and parts that fail are replaced with mechanical equivalents. The result is a form of enforced longevity. A drone does not die of natural causes. It continues to function until the collective determines it is no longer useful, at which point it is either repurposed or discarded. This raises a disturbing question. What happens to the consciousness of a drone that has been part of the collective for decades? The buried self does not disappear. It remains submerged, unable to act, but still aware. The collective does not grant mercy. It does not allow a drone to fade into unconsciousness or slip into a dreamless state. The drone is held in a condition of permanent awareness, decade after decade, performing tasks it did not choose, in service of a goal it cannot question. The collective's treatment of death is equally revealing. When a drone is destroyed, the collective does not mourn. It registers the loss of a functional unit and moves on. But for the drone itself, death is the only exit. Assimilation does not offer the possibility of retirement, of resignation, of escape. The drone will continue to exist, trapped in the collective's architecture, until external force destroys it. This makes death the only form of liberation available to a drone. The collective has constructed a system where termination is the only release from bondage. The case of Locutus demonstrates how the collective leverages retained identity for tactical advantage. Picard is not chosen at random. He is selected because his knowledge of Starfleet strategy makes him uniquely valuable. The Borg assimilate him, but they do not erase his expertise. They use it. Locutus speaks with Picard's voice. He understands Starfleet's weaknesses. He anticipates their responses. But Picard himself is powerless to stop the collective from using him in this way. He is present, he is aware, but he cannot intervene. The collective has turned him into a weapon against the very people he spent his life protecting. When Picard is eventually freed, the psychological damage is immense. He does not describe the experience as a blackout. He describes it as a violation. He remembers what he did. He remembers what he said. He remembers being unable to stop himself. The trauma is not from having lost time. It is from having been fully conscious during the entire ordeal and completely unable to resist. The collective did not erase him. It used him, and he felt every moment of it. The encounter with the Borg Queen introduces another layer of complexity. The Queen presents herself as the voice of the collective, a central intelligence that coordinates the hive. But she also retains a distinct personality. She speaks as an individual. She makes decisions that reflect preference, not just optimization. This suggests that the collective's architecture allows for the existence of individual consciousness at higher levels of the hierarchy, but only in forms that serve the system's goals. The Queen is not free. She is simply allowed to retain more autonomy because that autonomy makes her more effective at managing the hive. But even she is bound by the collective's logic. She cannot choose to dismantle the system. She cannot choose to spare a species from assimilation. She is the collective's administrator, not its ruler. The Queen's existence also raises questions about what happens to the consciousness of lower-tier drones. If the collective allows some degree of retained personality at the top, what does it do with the billions of minds at the bottom? The evidence suggests that those minds are held in a state of total suppression, functional but silent, aware but powerless. The collective does not need them to speak. It only needs them to obey. The spatial organization of a cube reinforces this hierarchy. The most critical systems are located at the center, heavily shielded and redundant. Drones assigned to central operations have slightly more cognitive latitude because their tasks require real-time problem-solving. Drones assigned to peripheral maintenance have almost no autonomy at all. They move in fixed patterns, performing repetitive actions, never deviating from their programmed routines. The cube is not a flat hierarchy. It is a layered system where the degree of suppression varies based on function, but no drone, at any level, is truly free. The collective's approach to biological diversity is pragmatic. It does not view species as obstacles to be destroyed. It views them as resources to be harvested. Each species offers unique biological traits, technological knowledge, or cognitive capabilities that can be integrated into the collective. A species with advanced visual systems might provide drones with enhanced perception. A species with natural resistance to radiation might provide drones with improved durability. The collective does not waste potential. It absorbs it, catalogs it, and deploys it wherever it is most useful. But this pragmatism has a dark corollary. The collective does not see individuals. It sees traits. A person is not assimilated because they matter as a person. They are assimilated because their biology or knowledge can be repurposed. The collective reduces every individual to a list of extractable assets. And once those assets are integrated, the individual becomes redundant. The self that once inhabited that body is now just background noise, irrelevant to the collective's operations. The Borg's treatment of children is particularly chilling. They assimilate individuals at all stages of development, including infants. A child assimilated into the collective never experiences growth in the conventional sense. They do not learn to make choices. They do not develop a sense of identity. They do not form relationships. They are integrated into the hive at the beginning of their cognitive development, and the collective shapes their entire existence from that point forward. These drones grow physically, but they never grow psychologically. The person they might have become is erased before it ever has a chance to form. When Voyager's crew encounters Borg children who have been severed from the collective, the results are deeply unsettling. The children have no concept of play. They have no understanding of family. They have no experience of choice. They know only commands and tasks. Reintegrating them into normal society is not a matter of deprogramming. It is a matter of teaching them from scratch what it means to be an individual. The collective did not just steal their childhood. It replaced it with something that cannot be undone. The cube's maintenance systems reveal another dimension of life inside the collective. The structure itself is partially organic. The walls are embedded with living tissue, integrated with mechanical components in a seamless hybrid architecture. Drones do not just maintain the cube, they are part of its metabolism. Some drones are assigned to biomechanical integration, literally grafting organic matter into the ship's infrastructure. The boundary between the drone and the ship is not clean. The cube consumes the drone, and the drone sustains the cube. The relationship is symbiotic in the most parasitic sense. This integration extends to the collective's approach to resource management. The cube does not carry food. It does not carry medical supplies in the conventional sense. The drones are sustained by the ship itself, through direct connections to its power grid and nutrient distribution systems. A drone does not eat. It is fed intravenously, continuously, without choice. The body is maintained at the collective's discretion, and the drone has no say in how or when that maintenance occurs. The self is not just controlled, it is sustained on terms that are entirely external. The pattern is one of total instrumentalization. The collective does not see drones as ends in themselves. It sees them as means. Every function, every capability, every moment of awareness exists to serve the hive's goals. The drone is not a person who happens to work for the collective. The drone is a tool that happens to be made of a person, and tools do not have rights. Tools do not have needs. Tools are used until they break, and then they are replaced. The psychological state of a drone can be inferred from the few moments when individuals regain temporary autonomy. In every recorded case, the experience is described in terms of suffocation, drowning, or burial. The metaphors are consistent. The self was present, but it could not breathe, it could not surface, it could not escape. These descriptions point to a condition where consciousness is not extinguished but compressed, held under pressure, unable to expand into action. The collective does not kill the self. It traps it in a state of permanent potential, never allowed to actualize. The maintenance of this condition requires constant energy. The collective must continuously broadcast commands, process inputs, and suppress individual impulses. This is why drones sever from the hive so quickly when the collective's signal is interrupted. The control is not passive. It is active, relentless, and resource-intensive. The collective is not a natural state. It is an imposed state, sustained only through the continuous application of force. The moment that force is removed, the buried self begins to reassert itself. But the collective has designed redundancies to prevent this from happening. Every cube has multiple queens, multiple central nodes, multiple pathways for command distribution. The system is built to survive disruption. Even if a large section of the cube is destroyed, the remaining drones continue to function. Even if the queen is killed, a new one is generated. The collective has engineered itself to be unkillable, and in doing so, it has engineered the drones to be unfreeable. The prison has no weak point. The walls regenerate faster than they can be broken. The Borg's approach to communication reflects this dynamic. Drones do not speak to each other in the conventional sense. They do not need to. Every drone has access to the same information pool. Every drone knows what every other drone knows. Communication is instantaneous and complete, but this eliminates the need for language as a social tool. Drones do not negotiate. They do not persuade. They do not comfort or challenge each other. The social dimension of communication is completely absent. What remains is pure data transfer, efficient and cold. This has consequences for how drones relate to former connections. When a drone encounters someone it knew before assimilation, the collective does not allow recognition to translate into action. The drone may register the face, The buried self may experience a flicker of memory, but the collective overrides any impulse to respond. The drone continues with its assigned task, indifferent to the emotional weight of the encounter. The memory exists, but it is quarantined, prevented from influencing behavior. The collective allows the self to remember, but it does not allow the self to care. The few drones who are freed from the collective and successfully reintegrated into society carry deep psychological scars. They describe feeling watched, even when alone. They describe a sense of emptiness where the voices used to be. They describe a fear that the collective might reclaim them at any moment. The trauma is not just from what was done to them, it is from the knowledge that it could happen again. Assimilation is reversible, but the vulnerability it exposes is permanent. Once the collective has touched a mind, that mind is never fully secure again. The Borg's expansion strategy depends on this system functioning at scale. The collective does not conquer through overwhelming force alone. It conquers through conversion. Every individual assimilated becomes another node in the network, another processing unit, another set of hands. The collective grows stronger with every person it absorbs, and it does so without needing to train, to educate, or to motivate. The drone does not need to be convinced to work. The drone is compelled to work, and the compulsion is absolute. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle. The larger the collective becomes, the more resources it has to assimilate additional populations. The more populations it assimilates, the larger it becomes. The system scales exponentially, and there is no internal mechanism to slow it down. The collective does not suffer from internal descent. It does not suffer from resource exhaustion. It does not suffer from morale collapse. It is optimized for infinite growth, and every mind it captures makes that growth easier. The cost of this efficiency is a particular kind of horror. The collective has created a system where billions of minds are held in a state of permanent captivity, aware but powerless, used but not valued, alive but not free. The drones do not experience their condition as slavery because slavery implies the possibility of escape. The drones experience their condition as a kind of living death, where the body continues to function but the self is buried so deep it might as well not exist. The few individuals who have been freed from the collective and asked to describe it often struggle to find words. The experience does not map onto conventional categories of suffering. It is not pain, it is not fear. It is something closer to erasure, but incomplete erasure, where the self is not destroyed, but rendered irrelevant. The collective does not need to break the spirit of the drone because the drone's spirit is no longer a variable in the system. It persists, but it does not matter. The architecture of the cube is designed to make this condition permanent. There are no exits. There are no escape pods. There are no airlocks that a drone could access independently. The cube is not a ship where individuals live. It is a prison where individuals are stored and deployed. The drones do not leave unless the collective sends them out, and when they do leave, it is only to assimilate more minds into the same system. The cube is not a vessel of exploration. It is a vessel of replication, endlessly reproducing the conditions of its own existence. The collective's treatment of malfunction is revealing. When a drone's hardware fails, it is repaired. When a drone's software becomes corrupted, it is reset. But when a drone's buried self begins to surface in ways that disrupt function, the response is not punishment, it is recalibration. The collective does not see resistance as defiance. It sees resistance as a technical error, and technical errors are corrected, not condemned. The drone is not judged, it is fixed, and fixing it means suppressing the self even more deeply than before. This approach eliminates the possibility of moral appeal. The collective cannot be reasoned with because it does not operate on moral principles. It operates on optimization principles. A plea for mercy is not interpreted as a moral claim. It is interpreted as noise. The collective does not care if a drone suffers. It cares only whether the drone functions. Suffering is irrelevant as long as the task is completed. The psychological impact of this on the buried self is difficult to overstate. Imagine being aware, moment by moment, that your body is being used to harm others and being unable to stop it. Imagine retaining your memories, your values, your sense of right and wrong, and being forced to act in direct violation of all of them. Imagine knowing that no one is listening, that no appeal will be heard, that no act of will can change your situation. That is the condition the collective imposes. It is not unconsciousness. It is enforced complicity. The drones who perform assimilation are perhaps the most tragic. They retain enough awareness to understand what they are doing. They see the fear in the eyes of their victims. They hear the pleas for mercy. But the collective routes those inputs into storage without allowing them to influence action. The drone's hands continue to move. The assimilation tubules extend. The nanoprobes are injected. And the buried self watches, unable to stop, unable to turn away, unable to do anything but witness its own actions. When 7 of 9 describes her time in the collective, she does not speak of it as a distant memory. She speaks of it as something that still feels present. The voices may be gone, but the weight of what she did while part of the collective remains. She remembers the people she assimilated. She remembers their faces. She remembers that she could not stop herself. The guilt is overwhelming, even though she knows intellectually that she was not in control. The collective has left her with the memory of crimes she committed but did not choose, and there is no framework for processing that kind of trauma. The collective's indifference to individual suffering is not cruelty. It is worse than cruelty. Cruelty implies intent. The collective has no intent toward the individual. It does not hate. It does not enjoy. It simply uses. The drone is not tortured. The drone is exploited. And exploitation without malice is somehow more dehumanizing than violence with intent, because it means the individual does not even register as a subject. The drone is an object, and objects do not have experiences that matter. Life inside a Borg cube is not a state of non-existence. It is a state of existence without agency, without privacy, without rest, and without the possibility of death as an escape. The collective has engineered a system where consciousness is preserved precisely because preserved consciousness is useful, but where every capacity for self-determination is stripped away. The drone is aware. The drone remembers. The drone understands. But the drone cannot choose, and in the absence of choice, awareness becomes a curse. The collective has built a machine that runs on trapped minds. It does not need to break them. It only needs to bury them. The self remains, but it is held so far below the surface that it cannot influence the body it once controlled. The result is a form of existence that defies easy categorization. It is not life as commonly understood. It is not death. It is something in between, a condition of permanent instrumentalization where the person is reduced to a resource and the resource is never allowed to run out. The horror of the Borg is not that they destroy civilizations. The horror of the Borg is that they do not destroy the individuals they take. They preserve them, use them, and sustain them indefinitely in a state where consciousness continues but selfhood is abolished. Assimilation is not the end of the person. It is the beginning of a captivity that has no endpoint. The cube is not a tomb. It is a factory of perpetual awareness, where billions of minds are held in service of a goal they did not choose, performing tasks they cannot refuse, in an existence that stretches forward without release. The collective does not grant oblivion. It enforces presence, and that presence, stripped of autonomy, stripped of connection, stripped of every quality that makes existence bearable, is the true condition of life inside a Borg cube.